We have two main items on the agenda for today. There were no particularly controversial or complicated items on the council agenda. I think there's one item in committee, and we'll be able to explain that one pretty easily. On the agenda today is some public safety updates, and we'll have a good discussion about that today. The second major item is unauthorized uses of residential and commercial properties, which is a pretty wide scope or description, and it really relates a lot to some of the public safety updates today. So we're going to get into those, and we may mix them around A and B, but there are two items I would highlight, both the incident that occurred on Lee Street and some of the things that happened on Bolton Avenue that I think relate to unauthorized uses or questionable uses of residential and or commercial properties. So there are lots of things that we all see on social media and elsewhere, whether it's an attempt to blame council members for crime or things that are happening in the city, or any single person or entity or pastors or anyone else, as though there's any person in this room who can predict where the next gun-involved incident will be, where the next person who possesses a weapon illegally, in most of the cases that lead to trouble, is sitting today. And boy, what a cop-out that is, because what it does is removes the responsibility of all of us as a community to fight something that takes a community fight. It takes everybody in a community, including media partners and others, to be A, truthful, and B, curious, inquisitive, get to the root of things, why things exist. And some of the ones you read with particular sort of curiosity yourself, if I thought that the election of a person, whether it's a president, a governor, a mayor, or a council person, could end crime, we'd have a pretty easy solution for all this. But crime is multifaceted. There are numerous causes that lead to it. But fortunately for us, we do have quite a few of those isolated. We know what they are, but undoing them and changing it is very, very difficult. But again, it takes the responsibility of the entire community. There are a few places where that starts. In classrooms, somewhat. But teachers aren't the insurer of what communities can do with kids. The place where it most starts is at home, with your parents or your caregiver or your guardian. It doesn't start with government being able to stop it. It isn't government's fault if children, and in many cases it can be, children are doing this. And government can't predict the next domestic violence moment. But government, if it's doing its job, can do focused deterrence, and government can learn patterns and hot spots and try to be preventive that way. And we've talked about all this many, many times in here. Government can also play a role in the early interventions and early investments in children's lives that hopefully make a corner be turned toward the good. What it can't do in many cases is where kids are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and I still call them kids, some of those things that are happening. And there's no amount of camps or government-sponsored events that are going to stop that, because those folks aren't interested in going to that. So, Tanya, you got a summer full of things happening that we push out and try to get out, but aren't always covered. I just want to thank you for doing that, and your team, and I know the council does too. And we'll keep reporting those, and I know how many kids we're serving, and I know it makes a difference, because you hear from those parents and those folks involved. And that's appreciated. And I also know that on our public safety updates under our community services officers, it's another place we're making that investment and intervention. And so we get a lot of questions about that, but only from one medium in the area asks about it. I'm not sure if there's just I would challenge anybody, you can go Google that practice and you'll find that the Dallas model, the Philadelphia model, all the models that everyone says to emulate that we're doing involve a huge amount of civilianization of police departments. So moving people out of the badge and gun into civilian roles for IT, IS, all of those kind of things, evidence and data gathering, et cetera. And that does relieve the ability, as we talked about at the last briefing, and create force multiplication, which I won't repeat. We talked about it last time. Force multiplication is any notion at all, whether it be equipment, persons, or technology that allows what a police officer could do by him or herself to be multiplied out. So it could be cameras, that's a form of force multiplication. It could be drones, big new form that is well used. It could be other equipment, it could be IT equipment and programs, it could be software. All of those things are part of it. Community service officers are a huge one. So you're able to take part-time folks who will be trained, who will have a full background check. It's what we call a triple background. So it's not just a normal working for the city, it's a police level one. And then they will go through an academy catering toward that. They will not carry a weapon, as we've gone over. We're going to bring it back in front of the council again and show you exactly, Mr. Fowler, what they are. We've done it twice now, I think, but we'll keep doing that. But we have 10 about to go online on top of 2, or there'll be 10 total. 10 total. So there's no, so while we talked about a dearth and a shortage of folks wanting to be full officers right now, we are not having a shortage of people applying for this position, which is great. So to give folks an idea of how seriously we take this, it can sound like you're making an excuse when you point out all the things you can't do to stop the next violent incident. But I do get perplexed and surprised that people think that a person can. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me logically, but what I can tell you is we've gone through a few just now at home, right, Doc? We've gone through community things we can do to curb it before it starts. But what I can also tell you is it's about following rules. That's a huge predictor once you get into early adulthood and adulthood. And a lot of what we're seeing is the breakdown of the community. That's why I started out with it takes a whole community to do this. It takes everybody participating. That means following zoning laws in your neighborhood. That means reporting crime and what you know about it. That's a huge obstacle for us. The trust, this is again multifaceted. Not just a lack of trust in police, but it's also just a lack of, I don't trust anybody, I'm not getting involved. What if I were retaliated against? And then there's just the worst version of all is just absolute, not my problem. It all becomes our problem when we breach these social compact rules. So we're going to talk a little bit about zoning and unauthorized uses of commercial and residential property, because in a few of these big cases, that's what's leading to it, Mr. Millard. That's what's leading to a lot of problems. And so I quit using the broken window theory because I think it's a little more than even that. But, loosely, if you want to call it the idea of entropy, if you will, something is allowed to be not in good shape. Then someone comes along and throws a rock through the window, so it's less in good shape. Then someone comes along and catches part of it on fire, even less so, and so on and so forth, until no one cares. And then people in the area start to feel, well, no one cares about me either. No one cares about my neighborhood. And all of this has an effect on how we feel about our neighborhood. So what do we do to battle that? Well, you want to beef up the relations in your neighborhood. And we do that through Safe Alex, another force multiplier. We get asked about Safe Alex, again, just by a few that I think it's certainly not about neighborhoods and the people who benefit from Safe Alex. They're not the ones talking about it. But the Safe Alex crew is back there led by our commissioner. We also have our former police chief, whom we still call chief, but Chief Ronnie Howard's back there. These guys are out every day running down what we would call neighborhood leads. They're looking at the things that make the quality of neighborhoods break down. We have a former officer, Johnny Parker, who is well-known in the community and operated in this regard before it was called Safe Alex through the department years ago, a single position that was sort of a neighborhood relations or community relations position. So this is much more beefed up now. I meet with Safe Alex every week. We are now in a rotation where after my regular staff meeting every week, we meet. It's not been less than an hour lately that our meetings are, and we go through a whole lot of what's happening. Mr. Charles Frederick Smith, a longtime councilman, heads up the neighborhood component. Chief Howard heads up the component that has, I guess, a little more look at violations, codes, and those kind of things. And so with those two together, and I'll talk a little bit about Shannon's role in a minute on data and the social service side, this is a real force multiplier and additive to our police department. Our chief can tell you, our commissioner knows this, who works with fire and police every day. The chief sits in our meetings, oftentimes a deputy chief as well. He has 2 deputy chiefs, and we stay very coordinated in our efforts. And again, we're going to tie that into residential and commercial property and unauthorized uses of those. Shreveport recently talked about, I guess I would call it they called it a squatter's law or a squatter's, ordinance. We have lots of things already in our ordinances that don't allow you to squat in a home that is not yours. But there are some very specific things we could do to help our folks in the field develop more calls as they approach a home. So if you think about it, Jim, when you go to a house, you're at the highest constitutional protection of an individual when you approach that door of a house. If you're not there chasing someone into the house, or you have a warrant, right? If you are lacking those things and you go to that door and you're just going to try to develop you suspect something, you're going to try to develop calls, that's your lowest watermark of authority as an officer when you approach that home. And so there are ways that you would develop more suspicion that could lead to probable cause, right? Because remember, what can you not do going in the house without, what do you have to go in that house? A warrant. And warrants are only issued on what? Probable cause. Probable cause, not reasonable suspicion, probable cause. So if someone says, wait, what? Sometimes you don't have to have a warrant. There are exceptions. Hot pursuit, you're chasing someone, right? They have evidence that can be gotten rid of real easy, flushed down a toilet, whatever, called evanescent evidence. It goes away. That could be one. Regulatory exception. You seize a car incident to a valid arrest and you inventory the car and find things. You didn't have to have a warrant because you're protecting the car coming into the warehouse or whatever. When you arrest somebody, incident to that arrest, and you do things, you can find things. That's an exception. So there are lots of exceptions we've all heard of. Then there's the big one we all should know, right? Plain view. You see a crime committed, you don't need a warrant there, an arrest warrant, because you're seeing it committed. With plain view came another version, plain smell. We all know what that one called for the last many years until, I guess, some legalization of some of those things. The plain smell exception is pretty widely used. Everybody knows what that one is. So when you approach a house and or let's say you're just a person, you live in the neighborhood, you see one of your neighbors and there's a pile of stuff on that porch and it's a code violation. The code officer walks up to that house. They're not a police officer. So but they are allowed by law, Chuck, to go on that property when they see an open code violation. Now, let's say the code officer walks up on the porch and sees a pack of syringes that look to have been used. Could that be that a diabetic person littered it on their own porch? It could be anything, but does it create another layer of suspicion in someone's mind? Perhaps it does, right? So what these squatter rules would say is when you have certain code violations, if you think there's someone in that house who's unauthorized, it gives you another level of protection to look into it. We're dealing with some pretty severe problems, and I don't have time to unpack it all today, but I will. If asked, I'll take you through exactly all the things that can happen on that porch. But the main idea I want you to leave with is each piece in that puzzle leads to a new question for an officer that ultimately you want to get to. The code officer being able to go back, interface with police, and perhaps develop probable cause. And do we want to do that at just any house? No. We want to do that in houses where there's a suspicion or you openly can see that folks are in that house. Maybe there are burn piles in the house. Maybe it's obvious you know your neighbor went into a nursing home and now there are people in the house you've never seen before. Those are all things that lead to issues. But when you're in that house, the question for us is, you can knock on some doors and without the right circumstances, the person answering the door does not have to tell you why they're there. The police do not have a right to force them to approve their authorized use, inhabitants, even just being in that place, in that home, right? So this is a problem. Was it always a problem in our communities? Yes. Is it more pronounced than ever in communities across this country? No question. Statistically, it is. And we're having that issue. And what we want to develop is stopping those issues. So that's one category of things that you're going to hear us talk about with some changes to our code. Ms. McGills and I went through it with Safe Alex. We've been doing it for about 2 weeks, working with them, listening to them. What are you seeing out there? What is code enforcement seeing out there? And working with our chief of police. We think there are some pretty easy changes that we can make to the code to help, like adding syringes itself to a list of violations. Doesn't matter if there's an innocent explanation. If you have syringes out on your porch, that's a problem, that's a danger, and that could lead to the ability to keep developing calls and deal with some of these problems. So why bring all that up? Because it's all related to the breakdown in communities that ultimately leads to the most severe form of violating the social compact, which is what? Murder, killing people, killing each other, shooting each other, committing great bodily harm upon each other. So in zoning, we have, in our commercial zoning, lots of things that aid us. We have an ABC law that helps us with an alcohol beverage control board. If you are involving in your home, your residence, in a neighborhood, a commercial use of your house, as in, I live in this house, it's a single family dwelling, and now I've decided to convert my house into, I'll allow parties at my house to charge people I don't know to come into my house for a fee and use my house, my swimming pool, my whatever, as a commercial purpose. Does anyone think that's legal in this room? It's your house, right? You do what you want with your house, right? Can you do that? No. Okay, so why not? What do you think makes it different? And that type of that I just gave, what makes that not okay? It's a home and what? I see somebody doing it. You're charging money, so you turn it into a commercial use. So, and what if you allow that commercial use to include, I don't know, teenagers to come to the house, dropped off, unsupervised, no relation to you, no anything at all, and then alcohol and drugs are involved. You think that creates another layer of problems? Yeah, it does. It sure does. You think that's happening in Alexandria? Yeah, we know it's happening. And yet on social media and even covered by quote unquote media, you see the fight go the other way, like how dare anyone not allow that to occur? So that's kind of an easy one. Everyone can kind of figure out qualitatively whether they want to allow that in a neighborhood. But first of all, it's not going to be allowed. We're going to stop it every time it occurs, and it's going to get easier to stop it. But if you're advertising for a party at your house, you're putting an advertisement out for teenagers to come to your house and charging them money, and they're getting dropped off there, what does that lead to in the neighborhood? Let's get outside of how wild that is from a teenager standpoint and just dumb. What does it lead to neighborhood relations? You think your neighbor likes that occurs? And then if we just analogize it to road rage. How do you think neighbors react with each other after that occurs 5 or 6 times? You think they're on the verge like a powder keg? What does that ultimately lead to? These aren't 20 offs, guys. These are 1 and 2 offs. It's going to lead to violence and other issues. So what do we have in place? Zoning rules. And zoning stops all of that from occurring. That's the whole point. You buy a house, you pay your taxes and live there, you get peaceable possession and some degree of tranquility for buying that house. If someone else buys a house next to you, they have the same rules as you. They should be even-handedly applied. If they turn their house into a commercial business, does that violate zoning? Generally speaking, yeah. Can you have home businesses? Yes. And you could have home businesses that don't do what? Infringe upon your neighbor's peaceable possession and enjoyment of their own home. So it's easy when I do the party one, right? Everybody gets that one. I wouldn't allow that. Although there are some people who say, how dare the city not allow those kids to go do that? I can't help that. I can't understand it for someone who thinks that way. Here's what I would say. That's an easy one for all of you. Now let's make it a little harder. Suppose the business is qualitatively a great business. It only helps people. But it's super loud and there's a car queue all the time during the day and the neighbors on each side hate it because it's loud. Then does it change? Does that change it because it's something we all say we like as opposed to kids being out of control? No, because it's not about the customers who go to that home business. They don't live next door every day. It's not even about whether the thing itself, from a content standpoint, is a good business. It's about whether you're infringing on the right of the person who lives there every day to live there and to enjoy peaceable possession of their home. You know, the home is, for most people, the single equity investment they have and will ever have. So we don't make content-based qualitative judgments on that. We do time, place, and that's what our laws do. They're designed to say when, how, where you can do certain things. Much like speech itself is time, place, and manner can be regulated, not content. Very similar analysis. So that's what neighborhood zoning does. It promotes health and safety and well-being. It promotes good neighborly relations. Do you have to like your neighbor? Of course not. But you can't create something at your house that makes their house worthless. And do these things, if every neighborhood were allowed to run any business they wanted at any decibel of noise they wanted, you think that would have an effect on house values? Of course it would. You think if you allow someone to put in their front yard anything they want, any size vehicle, any rutting up the yard, anything like, you think that affects people's values? And this single investment, that's the most important investment they have. So the standard you apply to these things is to be even-handed to all. And when you do that, you've got to make sure that you're focused on what the point is. Recently, there was a business that I think people would probably all say they liked. The customers to that business would say that. And the person who runs the business would say that. But the neighbors might not say that. And so for the customers of the business who don't live there every day to have more say in what the homeowners next to the business say is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And for people to suggest that doesn't the city have better things to do, first of all, I know for a fact that the city was working with this particular business, trying to, help make things work. But the idea that it's the city's responsibility to fix what is already a code violation is, again, it's a wrong-headed thing. And for all the council persons that called about it, shame on you too, because you know what exactly that leads to. The exceptional use that you throw on the mayor's office to try to figure out. It's not our law we're enforcing, it's yours. You're the city council. You have the zoning authority, not the mayor. But if the mayor or his staff in this case made an exception for some businesses and not others, what would that lead to? Who would get in trouble for that? It's not just me, it could be staff. It's just the idea that should the mayor's office be in the business of picking and choosing the winners and losers of home businesses? No. So what do? You apply the codes even-handed, and you don't have that problem. But I just wanted to point out that even something that looks good on its face only looks good in the eye of the beholder. So if you're the customer, it looks good because you do your thing and leave that home business, and you go to your house where there's, guess what? Not next to you. A home business that is a nuisance to you, that's loud or bothers you. This is the mundane stuff we deal with every day, right? The councilman, you hear about it when someone's mad. But these aren't difficult ones. The idea that a home business can affect the other homeowners. This was so bad in one case, again, for something very nice and needed and a beautiful thing, but then the organizers on Facebook thought it would be smart to go protest the complaining household with noise. They don't live there, but their solution was to go disrupt that house even more. Wow. That's how we are handling our community relations as a society. That's pathetic. So, the easy one was the swimming pool party with the teenagers. It gets a little harder as you go down the line. So what the council does is it makes good rules, and it has home business exceptions, where if you meet certain things, you can have one. And you can click on our website and see it, or you can go to Grow with Alexandria, and there's a whole page dedicated to it. Where you won't get the answer to most of these problems is on Facebook from the people who know everything. You will get the answer to it if you just go click on the city's website and query it or ask Alex Connects. You're going to get an answer to it. And you're certainly, from my staff, going to get any assistance we can on a home business that doesn't disturb your neighbors, doesn't create a traffic problem, but is generally consistent with neighborhood use. Why? Because it's a different world. We know everybody can't afford bricks and mortar, and frankly, our society's moving more toward this is going to be everywhere at all times. So we need to have the best rules about that. All right, back to the serious stuff. The incident on Lee Street is a perfect example of the rules not being followed, where I'm going to just put this in air quotes, and I'll say it out loud so the record gets it, where a business or a commercial activity didn't follow the rules and led to a terrible set of consequences, including a shooting. This is going to be hypothetical, and to the extent it covers things that did happen in this case, I'm making it up as I go. It's hypothetical. It is absolutely driven by knowing the facts of the case. So they're inextricably intertwined in this case. But if you go get your utilities turned back on that have been off, say it's for one purpose, open a business, do not have an occupational license or anything to sell alcohol or do anything to do with alcohol, lease or under the table lease or do anything by placing that business then in the position to allow people to have an alcohol party, whether they bring it in, whether they buy it in there, but you're charging at that door for them to come to have the party. That's a violation of a whole bunch of things. I'm not going to count them out now, but there's a whole bunch that went wrong there. And if that business is in violation of any fire codes or other things, you got another host of problems. And if that situation leads to a death, that's terrible, and there's liability consequences for that. So let's go back and mix our house and the residential that had the party. What do you all think that most homeowners' policies would do if you have minors drinking at a party? What would your homeowners' policy say about whether an injury on your property would be paid or not? There'd be an exclusion for that, right? Likely. I won't say in 100% of cases, but probably close. And I'm not saying there was alcohol with minors. I don't know that. I don't know, but there was no one checking IDs at a door or doing anything else to determine it, right? That's the problem with having that at your house. But if anybody were to be injured in that case, that's going to be a problem. You're not covered by the anti-dram shop law of Louisiana in that case. You don't get host liability protection there because you are operating a business at your house, and if there's a minor involved, it doesn't cover you anyway. But your policy will exclude. So now people are being told, bring your kids here to give them something to do under this false notion, and you're exposing that family to an injury. I wonder if there's an increased likelihood of injuries with a bunch of kids horse playing at a party in the middle of the night. You think? So when that injury occurs, that family's left naked in that situation. And they've been scammed in that situation. And that's unacceptable. So very simple, zoning rules prohibit that. So they have to be followed whether you like the event or you don't like the event. Because it's not designed to make a qualitative judgment call. It's designed to stop behavior that leads to risky behavior, that leads to catastrophic consequences. So, in the situation on Lee Street, you can take what happens in a residential, and that's bad enough, and now you've got adults coming in, no rules, no regulation, no situation where people have even had the business. You don't know if it's insured. You don't know anything. It's basically just an open party being charged at the door by a facility that's not supposed to operate as it's operating. I'll leave it at that. Same issue now with coverages on insurance, same issues with all of the other problems, except that thing's going to go from 2, 3, 4 in the morning, drinking all night. What do you think's going to happen then? There's a history at this location. So we're not in the excuse game. Should we, as the city, inquire in those situations? You bet. If we go by a bar and you see a licensed bar, you know it's there, and things are happening 3 or 4, the parking lot's full, it looks like underage kids are there. We've had this issue on Jackson Street, as y'all recall. We put a stop to it. But anywhere you see that where there's a suspicion, what should we do? Should we follow up on that? Sure. We should knock on that door and figure it out. But if something's a business and we don't know, we're not going to be able to prevent all of those catastrophes from happening. So what should we do as a city? Well, Jim, Chuck, Lizzie, others, we need to pass legislation that makes sure that if you are selling alcohol and you are doing it at certain times, that parking lot rules and other things have new things in place. Look, it wasn't always this way, but that's where we are today. Today, where we are is when folks pour out in the parking lot in the early morning hours, it's not for good stuff usually. I don't want to sound like a grandfather's grandfather on this. I get people want to have a good time and all, but statistically, the risk is now too great on those kinds of situations. And I'm just going to tell you, there's an absolute statistical relationship if those businesses aren't being run correctly, that you're going to see a consequence. So there's some thoughtful things that we want to bring up to you about changing it. We are studying where we are on Sunday closing rules and all that. There has been in the code now, I think it's 3 o'clock, 3 a.m. 3 a.m.'s late. If you got folks poured out in parking lots and are still sort of, the party carries out of the door at 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. in a parking lot, you're kind of building that recipe for a disastrous event. And so we have to, as a society, decide as a community, is this what we want? It shouldn't set up the bar owners fighting with the council. Because as soon as I say this, then it gets covered, however it gets covered, and that becomes the issue. They're trying to shut my business down. No one's trying to shut any business down. In fact, there are some model bars that have security and those things. That's what I'm talking about. If you're going to operate at certain times and hours and in certain ways, you're going to have to secure your environment. But what you can't do is secure your environment like this Lee Street situation. You're going to have real security. When all the facts come out in that case, it's going to be an anatomy of a bad thing for the public to see. I know what they are so far, and it is bothersome, to say the least. And it's preventable. Yes.
People that run into this situation, they're held liable. They will be held liable.
They will, but if they don't have any coverage or again, I mean, it's not about whether someone, when you have a business, there are certain things I would call part of the business judgment. Care and insurance and doing things that ensure that you have the safety of others at heart is part of that social obligation to people. Do you have to have insurance? In some cases, yes. In some cases, if you do an event with the city or other things, you're required to carry it and even make us a named insured. Not true for private bars, but when we have festivals and other events, we do a lot of things you guys may not be aware of to ensure that if something goes wrong, we're able to take care of that situation. Some of this stuff is what I would call pop-up alcohol sales events. It is designed for someone to just make some money and scoot. We're not going to allow that. We've shut down so many. The Lee Street incident, we're not going to allow that. We're not going to allow you to operate without any kind of licensing, et cetera. We stopped events at Convention Hall that are just primary alcohol sales events. I'm not talking about weddings and things like that, but to rent City Hall, to charge people money, whether it's BYOB or you're charging in there, has led to catastrophic consequences. And this isn't the place to do it, where our City Hall is run, where we have equipment, those kind of things. It frustrates people. It frustrates Stacy and others who need a venue for certain things. But the venue that happened on Lee Street, that's not how you do it. There are venues and ways to do it. But one of the ways is you got to do it right. You have to get a permit from us to do it. Why? Because then we know someone is responsible, that we can make sure has insurance, et cetera. See, if you do this stuff undercover, no one's responsible for the catastrophe. Right? But if you have to get a permit, which you're required to do for alcohol events like that, then there's a person who's responsible. There's someone that we can say, is it insured, or do you have security? Is the security proper for the event? Is it commensurate with the amount of people that'll be there? Guys, you have to have security at events now. We're doing it at our festivals. You do it at every LSU or Southern game you go to. We're living in that society now. And everybody has to secure events like that. So let's go back. Is that ever consistent with a neighborhood party like we just described? Not really, because even if you had full security there and parking attendants and all that, you're still blocking streets and you're doing stuff inconsistent with the neighborhood. If you're doing it at a commercial establishment, you got to do it right. We're going to have our CSOs, our community service officers, out everywhere. We are running through the final vetting of 10 officers to help. And they're going to be trained, and they're going to be able to help our police and help force multiply them out into our community. We are robustly meeting in our Safe Alex about our neighborhoods and neighborhood issues. We will continue to do that. We're going to continue to add new ways of focused deterrence. You're going to see us focus on some areas right now. It won't be a secret. It will be obvious. Gary and some of the council members, as y'all recall, from a blighted housing standpoint, we're doing the same. I think the council is finally in the right place on that. Instead of just doing it piecemeal everywhere, Lizzie, y'all are, I think, correctly starting to think, okay, let's go take out an area or take down the blight, if you will, make it better. And you're going to see that also with the policing. And in some cases in the exact same areas, so you really have an effect of clean it up. Ronnie Howard be heading that up. The Bolton Avenue incident, I'll be as careful as I can be, but I have a different view. There's so many things that tell us, don't tell Jack this, or don't tell the media that, because it could involve a minor, it could this. Guys, you know, there are exceptions to that, obviously, but I think 17 is the limit. Is that right, Chief, now? And so the names of the folks involved in that, I think still one on the run, right? Two are still happening. But there was an event at what is claimed to be a church. I don't have any evidence they're not, but leased itself out for an event, I guess, where teenagers could go, right? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so out of that incident, there was a shooting. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You know, maybe I can help resource those kind of things better, but I can't if you don't apply and tell us first. If you don't call Tanya or figure some of that out, or call Skip and Dr. Fox and figure some of that out, we can help do that. If somebody wants to host certain things, I'm not going to get involved in just anything. If you're not going to run it right, we can't help that. But if you need assistance because you want to do something for teens at graduations and all that, where you're not doing it at your house in a neighborhood, where you're doing it correctly, we're open to talking about partnering on how to do that, or at least helping you resource or advising you on how to do it right, the things you need. But if we don't know, we don't know. And it's not enough to say, well, y'all knew the cops passed by. That's fine. The cops don't know just driving by that an event's an illegal event. It's not, that's what we're explaining, any more than we know that what's going on inside someone's private home involves illegal activity. That's very hard for Ronnie to get in that right off the bat. He has to develop these things. So there's a shooting at that event. Then there's a second shooting. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Involving the same.
Same individuals.
Now, you may say, well, okay, that sounds bad. That's bad enough. What's the linkage here? There'll be more to unpack here, but this is the thing that I'm challenging all of our partners to look at. Stop thinking that the police can stop an unknown situation where no one said they were holding the event. What we have to do, what I have to do as a mayor, is hold people to the zoning rules, cut down on this every way we can. But Chief, is there evidence that at least folks knew, back to my point, Dr. Fox, about where it starts with the family, is there evidence that it was known that these kids were going to be involved in shootings
Yes, sir.
at the family level?
Yes, it was known that they were potentially violent because of previous engagements.
And even planning about it?
Yes, sir.
I know more. Some of the councilmen may know because some of your own know. But, you know, when that one's anatomized as well, when the anatomy of that one is, the Lee Street one's going to be rough. And when that one all comes out, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing that should occur. You know, we're always talking about don't point the finger. You got several coming back at you. I get that. But in this case, there's going to need to be some. This stuff starts at home with your whoever is taking care of you. Does that mean every mom or dad or mom and dad can prevent everything? No. Does that mean that parents who are doing everything they can lose control of a kid to influences out there, to other root and sentinel causes that pull that kid off the right track? Absolutely, that happens. And it's not a parent's fault. And we need to surround those parents and those grandmothers and those aunts and everyone else with our love and help and assistance. We need to do that. But in those cases, like you're going to find out in some of these where it's clear, we need to hold other people accountable. And you're going to see a problem in some of these cases. So about 40% of the shootings are occurring in District 1. So does that mean we should be having some focused deterrence in District 1? If 40% of the shootings are happening in one area of the city? You bet, and we are. But I got to tell you, I live in District 1, and we got some challenges in there. And there's some unpredictabilities and unpredictable things. No way for us to know. I live there, I ride through, I see it. There's no way to know when something's going to pop up, if you will. So what does that mean? It means you have to extra resource it. You got to have things in place that at least Some of it can be, see those guys, maybe we're gonna move over here, but look, I gotta tell you, man, you can be riding through and they can know you're in a cop car or see that it's a city vehicle, and it doesn't stop a lot of behavior. The fear of authority is not the same as it was when many of you were growing up. In fact, it's not there at all in a lot of cases. And some of that could be because they know they ain't got any place to put me. There's nowhere to hold me. I'm going to get sprung on a drug deal versus a violent crime. But all of that stuff is related to this challenge, and 40% in one area is a lot. District 3 has 20%, so there's 60% in those two areas. But District 3 is a little more complicated. The isolation's a little different. District 3 is doing a lot better than the folks in District 1 are doing. Folks in District 1 are having a tough time. I live there, have gunshots, I hear them at night. That's a strange thing to live that way and think about that. We've got to start in our neighborhoods, folks. That was the point of my briefing today. Public safety updates on those three things and unauthorized use of residential and commercial properties. I cannot stress enough to you what we know at the staff level of how the relationship between zoning violations, dilapidated properties, and all the things that go with it contribute to crime, and specifically violent crime. We're going to be talking about a lot of things that we're already doing. We think that if you looked at the Dallas model, which is sort of a benchmark, and others, we've been doing a lot of this for a long time. We started in my previous administration. If you look at the Safe Alex mock-up, we've been at it, but we're resourcing it more now than ever. We're adding not just people, but technology to it. But I think we've got to turn a different corner too that is recommended and new. This is going to sound, some people will say, oh, well, that's liberal. We need to lock them up. We've been locking them up forever. Louisiana's #1 at that. It sure hadn't helped us much. So it's not the only solution. Are there some folks that you have to remove, at least for a time, if not a long time? Of course. But right now, we're going to show you examples where people, in the case on Bolton Avenue, those warnings were out there for the criminal justice system to see. Those guys were let out of jail when there was a known problem. And it was told, do not release this kid. Where's the reporting on all this? Why is it only the police that are they can arrest, they can make a case, but we have to do better as a society of what do we do after that? If you got a known risk, you've got to mitigate that risk. Whether it's a person or, in the case of Lee Street, a situation, a business choice. You've got to mitigate risk better. So one of the things it turns out that there's a lot of data on, well, let me just address the elephant in the room too. Some of you in the room think, well, the problem is guns. And a bunch of you in the room, I see your heads going, no, it's not guns. And some of you are think you're being adherents to the Second Amendment with the idea that there should be no regulation for kids at risk and people that are known violent offenders and shouldn't have guns in the first place. I think you're wrong. And the data says that. And some of you probably think no one should be able to have a gun at all, and that's what's wrong with the whole of society. I don't have to make that decision for you. What I have to tell you is that when someone has a crime or is on probation or parole or is under a condition of release that says they can't possess a weapon, they can't. And it's unlawful to do so. And what I can tell you is the data shows that those persons, felons in possession of firearms, so they already have a felony, they can't have a firearm, and others who are not supposed to have a gun are the folks killing people with guns. And so if you have a felon in possession, which is a 10-year sentence, and they are now caught with a gun, so that's a new felony, just having a gun from their previous felony, and you take that down and walk that case out and give them walk-in probation day one, what do you think the data says that person's going to do very soon after they walk out? And it keeps happening over and over. We got to do a better job of that. This isn't pointing the finger or laying blame. But I can't change the fact that the police department's solving crimes at a high solve rate. What, should we be punished because we're doing a good job with that? No. But there's a part of the system that we each and all have different obligations and duties in. And this idea that it's all the police or the mayor, or if they just had more programs for kids, this would go away. That is a cop-out, that's lazy work, and it happens to be completely belied by the data. So, thank you. I heard an amen, I don't know where it came from, but thank you. So that's not gonna do it, but that's easy to do, because it gives you a villain to pin the tail on that donkey and say that's what it is. It's a much harder thing to face the truth, which is how much it takes all of us to make this work. Every part of the criminal justice system. Every part of the criminal justice system. And guys, it starts in your neighborhood. We have to respect each other's homes. You have to respect the liberty of someone to enjoy their house just as you would enjoy yours. So I started on that, I'm going to end on it. We're not going to tolerate code violations that just because it's convenient for you to like it affects the person who's the neighbor. Because that's what leads to these degradations of relationships and this breakdown. We can't do that. Does that mean there's not room for exceptions that are written in the law? Yeah, but you got to list them. The exception can't be, I know Mr. Fowler, I'm calling him. That's not an exception. That's cheating. And it's just going to lead to a problem. Is it okay to call Mr. Fowler and say, hey, can you find out if there's any mitigation that can be done to get this problem solved? Can you get your team to look into it? Absolutely. And he does it, and all the other council persons do it. And they're doing it right. That's what they're doing. They're calling and saying, hey, look, I don't know. I got this call. Can you look into it and figure out if there's some mitigation? Or at least advise us on what to do. Or call the person for us and tell them. That's all good. But we can't not enforce a rule for one unless the council changes it. And y'all have a pretty liberal policy about zone. In fact, it's too liberal probably. It's leading to some of the problems that we're having. All right, so you guys are going to start in a minute on, I think y'all have a bunch of how many condemnations are up today? 5? Okay. So I would just remind everybody that we continue to push your alleged agenda of condemning and getting this stuff removed, but most of the time, if not all of the time, excuse me, Ms. Felt, most of the time, I'll go with vast majority, and not all. In here is where the exception is given, and you have that right in here when you vote on it. 4 people can do that, but the challenge is for us to get it done, so when it's obvious that some of them are tougher, we pulled one off tonight because it's complicated and working through it. We didn't want to, but we're going to keep working on it. Yes?
Mayor, I want you to touch on what you said about the father's presence in the home.
Thank you, Charles Frederick Smith, for that loaded one to go through. Look, Charles Smith, I'm not gonna, I can't do that. That's gonna be too big of a social commentary, but, I would just tell everybody, y'all can Google everything, and there's a lot of information out there. Read about the sentinel causes of these things, and you're gonna find we know more than ever about what's doing things, and we know more than ever about the combination of activity to at least curb it. What we're not doing more than ever, okay, I'm gonna say it again. We know more than ever what's causing the problems. We know more than ever the combination of solutions to at least curb it, not cure it, but curb it. But you know what else is more than ever? The lack of community will to come together to apply those curbing solutions. That's the astounding part. I suspect a lot of it is because of these and so much information, and it's crazy. This thing connects us and is the most disconnecting force in our lives. But man, it's tough to read about why that party should go on in my neighborhood in your neighborhood, but not mine, right? And why that business should be allowed in your neighborhood, because I'm the customer, but not mine. We got to enforce this stuff. The Bolton Avenue, I told Jack this the other day at the police officer memorial when we honored our fallen guys the other day, that it's just going to hurt to say. I think that was a preventable situation that is not one of the things I would accept out of the group, that, okay, you couldn't have known when this would happen. It's reactionary. I just feel like there was a lot of data known when that kid did that. And that's not okay. Everybody's got to own a piece of that. Whatever your part is, we got to own that as a community. But it goes back to simple stuff like, was that party properly done in the first place? I'm sure I'll get some guff for saying that. I think no. Or at least let's say it this way. Let everyone know if you're doing a teenage event like that and you don't have the proper security and all that. We need to know that. So that one's tough. That one's really tough. That involves young people, but it involved people that knew that result wasn't remote. Okay? Those are the ones that keep you up. They all keep you up, but that one does if you think that data could have been presented and that one could have been stopped. And there's more than one like that, guys. There's more than one like that. And I think we have a duty, Chuck, to follow up, and we're starting to keep data on this, where the city itself is going to have to weigh in and say, justice system, stop. This is the history here. It's not as simple as you think. And we're going to be pushed back on for that, council members. You're going to be told to stay in your lane. But who's getting the blame every day for it? You are. I am. The arrest is made, the case is investigated, and if we need to do better on our investigation, our files, then so be it, whatever it takes. Okay? All right, questions? All right, we'll start, try to keep a public safety briefing every week that we do it, so invite our partners to be there for that. I'll take questions from those guys in most of them, unless it's to a specific purpose or we say we don't. I did just now and will continue to. I also will answer written questions sent to us at these briefings and unpack them as we need to. I know I'm beating it up, but I just got to tell y'all, you got to help us maintain order at the neighborhood level. That's where it has to be. And District 1 needs our help. Don't think you can blame it on the housing authorities and all that. I always want to tell people, I know it's called the Alexandria Housing Authority, it's not our housing authority. And then I feel guilty about saying that because the truth is it doesn't matter who technically has the jurisdiction. It's ours because it's our community's housing authority. We have to help them do better. And they're trying. They're trying. And we're going to keep Commissioner resourcing and trying to make sure that Stefan and his folks have the resources they need. Too many people being shot, guys. I'm happy at the next one to talk about more of those sentinel causes of why. There's a lot of new data, Skip, as we've talked about out there. Some of our assumptions have been wrong for decades. And that offers an opportunity, though, to rethink what we're doing, and it offers an opportunity to rethink the community involvement. But you can't get it on Facebook, guys. You got to roll up your sleeves. It's time. You got to get your hands a little dirty. All right. Anything? All right. Thank y'all so much. Council meeting will be, I think, at 4:45. So we're an hour into this, and I'll see y'all at the council meeting. Darren, we can go off it.